What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video I'm going to be bringing you an endgame build, this time for the bow. Now what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build that is constructed from the rarest armor, weaponry, decorations and talismans in the game. It also does feature Krios crafting, but it's not to the extent where every single skill on the Krios crafting is unobtainable. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a variety of different hunting styles. Now when it comes to the bow, it's an exceedingly strong weapon, although it is fragile. Nonetheless, with strong dodging capabilities, you should be able to avoid attacks. Now for this endgame bow build, I'm going to be showing off what I like to call the Strife Bow build. This build is all about increasing your damage with the Strife skill combined with the Berserk skill, giving you a strong elemental DPS build that also changes the way you play, as you'll be changing between your switch skills scrolls to give yourself increased elemental damage output and survivability. So for the Strife Bow build, you'll need the following. You'll need the full Chaotic Gormagala armor set, which is also referred to as the Nephilim set if you're a female hunter. This includes the Chaotic Helm, Chaotic Mail, Chaotic Vambraces, Chaotic Fouls, and the Chaotic Greaves. For your Petalace, this is down to personal preference. You can either use the Demon Petalace if you want extra damage, or the Absolute Petalace if you want something a little bit more balanced. As for your Talisman, try to get a Talisman with as much attack boost on it as possible. I also have an extra point in Critical Eye and a tier 3 decoration slot on it. As for your bow, now this is an interchangeable bow build, so you can get away with using any of the elemental bows. Remember, I like to use bows that are spread arrows, so if you're using a water bow, as is shown here, you want the Chalai War Bow, which is the Daimyo Hermitor bow. If you're using an ice bow, I'd recommend the Barioth bow. A fire bow, then I'd recommend the Rathian bow. If you want a thunder bow, then I recommend the Kezu bow. And then finally, if you want a dragon bow, I'd recommend the gold Rathian bow. The only issue when it comes to the bows is that the decoration slots are inconsistent. So some of these builds, depending on what bow you're using, may have more skills than others, but I'll talk about that more when we're in the skill section. Now as for the Krios crafting on the bows, I first recommend going for a Rampage slot upgrade so you can have a tier 3 decoration slot. Afterwards, go for elemental attack up. As for your Rampage decoration, I'd recommend going for the Elemental Bane Rampage decoration to increase our elemental damage against monsters. However, if the monster we're going up against is particularly strong against elements, then take one of the anti-species decorations instead. And speaking of decorations, you've got a lot of options here. So first of all, I've gone for a hard stream jaw and a normal stream jaw to max out water attack. Now remember, if you are using a different bow with a different element, this hard stream jaw and the stream jaw will be replaced by whatever new element you are using. So say you're using the Barioth bow, which is the ice bow, then you'll have frost jaws instead. I've also got a chain jaw for a point in the burst skill. This skill may be absent on some builds depending on what bow you are using. Anyway, I've then got a mighty bow jaw for the bow charge plus skill, critical jaw to max out critical boost, a bloodening jaw to max out blood right, spirit bird core jaw for a point in the spirit bird core skill, spread jaws to max out the spread shot skill, a brace jaw for a point in flinch free, quick load jaws to get the reload speed to level 2, a jumping jaw for a point in evade extender, and an attack jaw to get attack boost to level 4. Like I mentioned though, depending on what bow you are using, you may have to switch some of these jaws around. For example, the brace jaw as well as the quick load jaws can be swapped out for the elemental jaws if you're using one of the bows that doesn't have many decoration slots on it. So keep that in mind. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a basic raw attack of 404, with a water rating of 46, you have 40% base affinity with a very high defense of 793 that is exceedingly strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. However, when it comes to this build, its stats are fluctuating. When Berserk and Bloodlust are in effect, we'll have a raw attack of 449 with a water rating of 64 and a 60% base affinity, which can potentially be even higher when you take into account fighting off the effects of the Frenzy virus. Depending on what bow you are using, once you've overcome the effects of Bloodlust and the Frenzy virus, you can potentially have 85% or even 100% base affinity. As for the switch skills, I say these are down to personal preference, however I always recommend using the dodge bolt as it provides you a great mechanic to counter attacks and keep yourself alive. So when it comes to the skills, now this build has quite a few complex skills, but first of all you'll have Critical Eye at level 7. Critical Eye is a skill that increases the base affinity of a build up to 40%. You'll then have Resentment at level 5, which is a skill that increases our raw attack whenever there is a portion of red health on our health bar. This should be pretty much active all the time with this build, thanks to the Berserk skill. You'll then have Water Attack at level 5. Water Attack is a skill that increases the water rating and water damage of this build, but remember, if you're using a different bow with a different element, then you'll replace Water Attack to match whatever new element you are using. You'll then have Attack Boost at level 4, increasing the raw attack of our build again, and at level 4 or above, provides us a percentage bonus to our raw attack as well. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3. Critical Boost is a skill that increases the damage of our critical attacks, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have Spread Up at level 3, increasing the damage of our spread arrows. You'll then have Blood Right at level 3. Blood Right is a skill that, whenever we're attacking a broken monster body part, will start to regenerate our health. This, in all honesty, is one of the main counter mechanics and counter skills to the Berserk skill we'll talk about in a moment. You could replace Blood Right if you wanted to with other sorts of recovery skills like Recovery Up, the Kushala Blessing at level 3, or Recovery Speed if you wanted to. You'll then have Coalescence at level 3, which is a skill that whenever we recover from a blight or abnormal status, so in the case of this build, it would be Bloodlust. When we overcome Bloodlust, Coalescence will kick in. This will grant us bonus raw attack, elemental attack, and status build-up. You'll then have Bloodlust at level 3, which is a skill that gives our hunter a modified version of the Frenzy virus when we engage in combat. You can tell when this is kicked in by the bluish purplish bar above our health bar. When inflicted, our health will slowly start to deplete, but in return our attack will be increased, we'll gain increased evasion capabilities, and our stamina depletion will be reduced. On top of that, after we overcome the Frenzy virus by dealing enough damage, we will be healed for the health that the skill drained, and will gain a bonus to our base affinity. We'll then have Strife at level 3, which is the namesake of this build. Strife is a skill that increases elemental attack and affinity in proportion to the length of red health on your health bar. So the more red health you have on your health bar, the more elemental attack and affinity will gain. This works in unison and synergizes well with Berserk, as it should mean we'll have a very large red health bar, gaining the full DPS bonuses that this skill provides. Additionally as well, when the red health on our health bar is 60% or more, as well as gaining further increases to our elemental attack and affinity, we'll also gain infinite stamina, which is the main reason that this bow build doesn't feature any stamina management skills, as we are relying on Strife to give us that infinite stamina. So you always have to keep an eye on your health to make sure you have that 60% as much as possible so you get your infinite stamina bonus. Anyway, you'll then have Reload Speed at level 2, which may not be available on some versions of this build depending on what bow you are using. Regardless, Reload Speed at level 2 is a skill that allows us to automatically equip bow coatings by simply selecting them. You'll then have Berserk at level 2, which is another key skill for this build. Berserk is a skill that when you switch to the blue scroll, the blue switch skill scroll, all your vitality will change to red. Afterwards, it will start decreasing slowly over time. But so long as you have red health and you're on your blue switch skill scroll and the Berserk skill isn't in effect, you cannot faint. The downside of this is you have to watch out because should you take a hit whilst Berserk is active, the health drain will increase to the point that it can be dangerous, resulting in a cart. When this happens, you'll need to switch back to the red scroll or use potions to heal up. If you want a more in-depth video regarding the Strife skill as well as the Berserk skill, there is one found elsewhere on the channel, so check it out. Anyway, you'll then have Bow Charge Plus at level 1, which is a skill, an essential skill for the bow, as it increases the maximum bow charge level by 1. When you look at a bow in the blacksmith, you'll normally see that the last arrow level is grayed out. Bow Charge Plus basically unlocks this. You'll then have Evade Extender at level 1, which is a useful quality of life skill and can be potentially dropped if you were more confident. Evade Extender is a skill that increases the distance at which we evade and dodge. You'll then have Flinch Free at level 1, another optional skill which may not be available on some versions of this build depending on what bow you are using. Basically this prevents minor knockbacks from monsters and especially your allies. You'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which is a skill that allows a hunter to receive random effects of Spirit Birds at fixed intervals. So basically during the course of a hunt, Spirit Birds will come to you rather than you have to go out of your way to them. You'll then have Blade Scale Hone at level 1, which is a skill that after dodging or evading an attack at the right time, our close range coatings will receive a temporary damage boost. Again, this is a potential skill that you can drop if you wanted to, especially if you're using a bow that also has access to power coatings. You'll then have Element Exploit at level 1, which is a skill that increases elemental damage when attacking a monster body part that is extremely weak to the elements. If the monster body part has an elemental weakness of 25 or above, Element Exploit will take effect. You'll then have Burst at level 1, formerly known as Chain Crit, which after continuously landing hits on a monster, will gradually increase our attack and elemental attack. Again, this skill may be missing on some versions of this build depending on what bow you are using. So those are all the skills for this build. Let's move on to the next section where we talk about the Krios crafting. Now when it comes to the Krios crafting, I tend to go for decoration slot upgrades or additional decoration slots to allow more customization with our builds. But this build has got one or two rarer skills on them. So for the Chaotic Helm, I've got a point in the Bloodbright skill. For the Chaotic Mail, again I've got another point in the Bloodbright skill. This is probably the rarest Krios crafting featured on this build. For the Chaotic Vambraces, I got a point in the Blade Hone skill as well as an additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Chaotic Fouds, I got a tier 4 decoration slot upgrade, and then for the Chaotic Greaves, I got an additional point in Bloodlust. But every build out there has various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. Even endgame builds come with various negatives to counter their positives. For this Strife Bow build, its biggest pro is its damage output. Having very high elemental damage output combined with massive affinity is able to take on monsters very quickly so long as you're countering them with the correct element. On top of that, the next pro is the Berserk skill. The Berserk skill, whilst changing our entire health bar to red, whilst at first may seem like a negative, is actually a positive, as it allows us to take hits that would otherwise cause us to faint, whilst at the same time synergizing with our other DPS skills like Strife. And the final pro is that this build is interchangeable with the other elements in the game. All you have to do is switch out the bow with a few decorations and you'll be able to use pretty much any elements to counter any monster you may go against. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is, unfortunately, the health drain aspects of this build. Now the Berserk skill health drain on its own isn't too dangerous, but should you take a hit whilst this is active, the health drain is increased, and on top of that, should you be under the influence of the Bloodlust skill, the health drain is even worse. This means that you have to constantly keep an eye on your health bar whilst fighting a monster, and this could be seen as a negative. You can counter this by using certain items and tools, such as the Gourmet Fish, or your Palico and Palamute using healing tools, such as the Clover Bats. And the final con is, unfortunately, this is a decoration heavy build. In a way, there are more skills that I would like to use on this build, but because we have a limited amount of decoration slots, we cannot use them. So there we have it, those are all the pros and cons for this Strife build. Now for me this is a fun build to use, and whilst it does change your playstyle slightly, as you have to constantly keep an eye on your health, manage the certain thresholds, as in you have to make sure that you have to have 60% red health or more on your health bar to keep the infinite stamina, so on and so forth, it nonetheless for me is quite enjoyable. That, coupled with the fact that this is a very strong elemental DPS build, means that you're able to bring down monsters so long as you're countering them with the correct elements. I also find that for a bow user, Berserk is actually quite useful in keeping us alive. Most of the time, should you take a smack from a monster with the bow, then you'll go down in very few hits. With Berserk, it kind of counters this a little bit, potentially keeping you in the fight for longer. Just be sure to get yourself to a safe location after taking a hit before the health drain becomes too severe and heal up. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another endgame bow build for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.